Thank you. Thank you, one person. I appreciate that. Welcome to the King Institute for Faith and Culture for the third week in a row. This has been quite a flurry of activity for us, and I appreciate the many of you who came out to support our events for Martin Luther King weekend and also with Kate Bowler. Today we have our faculty lecture for the spring, and if you don't know the tradition, this goes back over a third of King's history. It started in the early 60s, a tradition in which students would choose 2 faculty members a year to do an address beyond the classroom and vice versa. So today's faculty lecturer is Alexander Brumlik, and Aubrey Lee will introduce him in a moment. My only announcement is that our next speaker is February 25th. Monday, February 25th, we will host Esther Starobin. She is a member of the Survivors Speakers Bureau from the United States Memorial Holocaust Museum. And it's worth coming to hear her. She'll be here in the morning and in the evening at Central Presbyterian on the 25th. So I will turn it over to Aubrey. Thank you.
Good morning. It's indeed my privilege to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Alexander Brumlik. He is an associate professor of economics in the School of Business and Economics and Technology, and I can claim part of the responsibility for him being here because I think, Alex, I was on your search committee. Is that correct? But I thought it was curious. I looked on his faculty website, and he has a quote, and this quote I think is very instructive. It says, "We shall not grow wiser before we learn that much we have done was very foolish." And I think we could all learn from that. Maybe we thought about that. Alexander received his PhD in economics from Georgia State. He gave his life to Christ in school and heard the call to be a teacher. He became the faculty advisor for the Christian Students Organizations and pursued a lot of opportunities to enhance his teaching. His first jobs in teaching were at community colleges, and he taught for 2 years at Emory University. After graduating, he was hired at King, and that's about 6 years ago. And he currently serves as the freshman liaison for the School of Business and Economics and Technology. And his service extends well beyond the King community. He's a rescue officer for the Bristol, Tennessee Police Department. On campus, he's on the committee on teaching and excellence and learning. And of course, he's speaking today for our Institute for Faith and Learning. His research is of interest to me because before entering higher education, I worked for over 20 years in human resource management. So he is engaged in research and applied labor using experience as an empirical methodology. His issues that are subjects of his study are related to workers' effort, which again, as an HR person. He's written papers on the economics of happiness, which I think is an interesting topic. And he's Associate Director of the King Institute for Regional Economic Studies in the School of Business, and he is constantly mentoring students. And the thing that impresses me most about Alex, aside from all the things I've said, is in observing him work with our students and be actively engaged. He really cares. He truly cares about how his students do and King as an institute. So it's my privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Alexander Brumlik.
You did amazing. Thank you so much. Hello? Okay. Be more careful this time. All right, so a lot of you don't know me very well, and maybe the only thing that you know about me is this introduction. So I figured I'd start off by showing you some pictures that I took last year of some of my hobbies. So here I am at 30,000 feet climbing Mount Everest. I found a cheap ticket on JetBlue, and I was like, like what the heck, we've got a snow day here at school, so. And then here I am at the Formula One races, getting my tires and wheels realigned. Monaco was a bit warm last year. And then here's a picture I took last month. Me and a bunch of divers actually held on to Great Blue, the largest living great white shark. And if you're wondering why there's a woman in the picture, well, obviously I'm the one behind the camera, okay? And so, these are a little bit of, my pastimes. They're a little bit interesting, but my true passion, outside of the things that you've got to say, like God and family, by the way, hi, Dad, is economics. I love economics. It's fascinating because it's smart, and it tries to find solutions to everyday problems. So because some of you have never had an economics course, or it's been a while, I thought I'd start by just telling you what it is. So in its most simplest form, economics is the science of how people make choices. All right? And we economists are very proud of the fact that it's modeled after physics. And where physics tries to explain the universe, economics tries to understand human behavior. And both rely heavily on the scientific method. So we have a theoretical approach where we construct theories and models, and there's an empirical approach where we gather data and then test these theories. So we've all heard this theory before. An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force, right? This is Newton's great law, his first law of motion. And in economics, we also have a great law, right? It's the law of demand. And it says, holding everything else constant, when you lower the price, people will buy more. And so that's the theory, and we can test this theory, and we professors, we love to do little thought experiments. So let's suppose I'm selling some Apple Watches, all right? And I went on the website yesterday, and Best Buy is selling these for $399. So we're gonna start off at a good price, and let's say $299, all right? So who would be willing to buy a brand new, in the box, Apple Watch Series 4 for $299? All right, so raise your hand, all right? A few of y'all, okay. So what about, one-time offer, really good price, $100, all right? Any hands here? All right, ooh, a lot more, all right? So here we go, we just tested this law of demand, all right? You can put your hands down, all right? We've only changed one thing. We lowered the price, and the number of hands went up, all right? So nobody said, $299, oh yeah, I'll buy 3, and then $100 said, oh no, now I don't want it. All right, that would be weird. All right, so after the talk, anybody with their hands up, you guys can give me the $100, all right, and then you can go see Martin Dodderwyk in his office to go collect your Apple Watch. All right, well, what if we wanted to test something a bit more interesting? All right, say like the relationship of effort to wages. All right, so basically asking the question, do people who are paid more, do they work harder? All right, and I asked this question to my students, and I asked them to try to come up with an experiment. And a lot of times they'll say something like, well, Dr. Brumlik, what I would do is I'd compare 2 companies, right? So maybe I'd look at company A and say, suppose they pay a high wage. I'd compare what those workers produce, their productivity, to company B that pays a low wage. And I'm like, maybe not the best approach, all right? Because there's probably important differences between these 2 industries. I think it's logical to think that companies that can afford to pay their workers better are probably going to be able to attract better workers with better education and better skills. And so and along those lines, I've constructed 2 lists. All right? On the left-hand side, you've got the top 10 paying companies in the world. Qualcomm, Google, Yahoo, eBay, Microsoft, Facebook, LinkedIn, Apple, a couple others. All right? And on the right-hand side, all right, I've got the lowest paying. And I was hesitant to put the name of specific companies. I was hesitant to put the name of specific companies, but you get a kind of an idea that the companies on the left are very different than the ones on the right. Right? On the left, you've got very techy, very innovative companies, and those employees are going to have a very different profile. Why is it making that noise? Okay. Now, we'd like to think, when it comes to wages, that two workers with the same ability should make the same, and that things like gender shouldn't matter. Okay, but of course, we know that it does. So I'm going to start off by showing you data from the Federal Reserve, right? And we're looking at the employment levels of men and women, right? So basically we're showing the number of men and women with jobs. And it goes back to 1948, and that red line starts off, they're in terms of thousands, so there's over 40 million men working, but less than 20 million women working. And that makes sense, because back then there was a heavy stigma for women to work. And then around the 1970s, we had this cultural revolution, and women start entering the labor force in much greater numbers, and so that blue line starts to steepen out, and then it starts to sort of run parallel, right? And they start both reacting to the same economic forces, going down during the recession, and then started going back up, right? So that's national data, but we want to bring this back to our own backyard. And so I don't know if Ben Allen is here, but he's a TMBA student, and he actually helped me gather some of this data that I used for the graph, so I just wanted to thank him. And we're still looking at employment levels, so that red line is a number of men working, and the blue line, women. Right? And we pick up the story in 1997, so that's where our data starts. And there's more men working than women. But women start to catch up, but then there's that Great Recession, and both men and women's employment falls. But what's interesting, all right, is that women bounced back faster. Right? And our data, unfortunately, ends in 2017. All right? But in 2017, there was actually more women working in the Tri-Cities than men. Right? And part of this is attributed to the fact that women are in industries like education and healthcare, which are more recession-proof. Okay, but let's turn to wages. All right? And I don't think it's a surprise to anybody in this room that men make more money than women. You pick up the newspaper or look at the news, and it's almost daily that we see somebody talking about this. And according to Fortune, this wage gap, though, is narrowing nationally. So let's look at this picture in our own backyard. Well, I think it's pretty clear, all right, that this wage gap is not narrowing. It looks pretty discouraging. It looks like the gap is actually widening. But visual inspection can be misleading because they're both going up. So what we need to look at it as a percentage of one or the other. And to do this, we're going to look at a ratio, and a ratio just means fraction. Ugh. All right, so we're going to look at the ratio of female to male earnings. All right, and so the way this works is, let's suppose that a woman makes $30,000 and a man makes $30,000. So they're making the same. So 30,000 over 30,000, that equals 1. So if our fraction equals 1, then that means that we've got wage parity, and men and women make the same amount. Right? But if a woman earns 18,000 and a man earns 30,000, well, 18,000 over 30,000 equals 0.6. And that's about where we're at. So a woman is earning about 40% less than a man. And they start to make up some of that ground, okay, but then we have that Great Recession, and the earnings drop. But then around 2012, the earnings start to catch up and starts to go up. So, we've got some progress. Women, of course, would say not fast enough, but at least it looks like we're moving in the right direction. And here, we're looking at average earnings for men and women by education. And the graph really should say in the Tri-Cities, because this is, everything here is for here. And two things should stand out. One, education matters, right? And that's a good thing for places like King that's selling education, all right? So as you get more education, your earnings goes up. And if I'm not wrong, right, since this is for the Tri-Cities, there's only a few universities in our area. So a lot of this is probably attributed to King University. On the next slide, I've got some regressions where I actually control for lots of variables. I control for gender and for location, for education, and over 20 different types of industries. And what we find is that people with bachelor degrees or advanced degrees make $4,500 more a month than somebody without a degree. That's a lot. That's something that maybe our marketing team, I don't know if they're here, might want to grab a hold of, okay? But the second thing that we see is that the gap is much larger for people with more education than for less education. And the reason for that is because the types of jobs available to people with low education or lower education tend to be low-skilled jobs. And those workers tend to be more homogeneous, more the same, and so there's just less opportunities for wage differences. On the left-hand side, workers look very different. Right? There's a lot greater difference between workers, and Carnevale and others explain that about 47% of this gap is attributed to major choice. They say the specific majors that women choose are still largely traditional, defined by such interests and values as nurturing, caregiving, and social human interaction. Women dominate two of the lowest paying majors. Water break. So I said that I did a regression. I didn't want to spend any time on that table, but I want you to take away three things from that. One, after controlling for all of those things, women on average make $1,500 less per month. We see that there's a penalty to living in the Tri-Cities. Okay, I think we all knew that if living here, you're probably going to earn less money. I knew that. I didn't know the actual dollar amount, okay? But I experienced that when I was graduating and I saw my friends looking for jobs and I was looking for jobs. In fact, I had other offers in different cities. I knew that coming to Northeast Tennessee was going to pay a little bit less. But it's gorgeous here. The people are amazing. Students are amazing. All right. I get to go hiking every spring and fall. I get to experience severe allergy attacks. So there's a give and take. All right. That last interaction is probably the most interesting. All right. So we know that we know that men make more than women nationally, and we know that men make more than women locally. But how does a woman in the Tri-Cities compare to a woman nationally? And on average, a woman here makes $160 more than a woman nationally. So that's something pretty cool, all right? That's something pretty neat, all right? And so I think that's a good place to just take a pause for a moment and take a breath, all right? And let's just reflect back on what we've done so far, all right? So I've shown you the existence of this wage gap, right? And I've explained to you one reason why this might be happening, which is Carnevale's reason of major choice, all right? But the title of the talk is 3 reasons. So I've got 2 to go, all right? And I'm going to put this idea of the wage gap on the side burner for a moment and instead talk about some research that I'm doing, right? And it's going to seem unrelated because in many ways it is unrelated, all right? Because when I was doing this research, I wasn't looking for differences. I wasn't trying to set out to try to explain the wage gap. But when you're going through the results, I found very different behavior that men and women chose. And I think, and I hope to convince you, that it does have something to do with this wage gap. All right? So we academics are expected to do research. And if there's one thing that we love to talk about, it's our own research, all right? And it's not every day I've got a room of a couple hundred people here to listen to me talk. Every week, maybe, but certainly not every day. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about the things that I love to do and that are really neat to me, right? And I love to dabble in a field called experimental economics and try to measure people's effort. Right? And this is something, obviously, that a manager would want to know how to do, extract as much out of their workers as possible. And I've got a specific interest in something called tournament theory. And tournament theory is a theory in economics that explains how wages come about due to relative performance. Right? And so what I want you guys to think of is the Olympics. All right? And so in the Olympics, there's lots of different types of races. It doesn't matter which one you pick, swimming or speed skating. Your prize depends on your relative rank, how you match up, how you compare to the other racers. So if you get first prize, if you're the fastest, then you get the gold medal. If you're in second, silver, bronze, and fourth, you're off the podium altogether. And the reason Olympics makes such a good example is because small differences in performance, right? We're talking about a fraction of a second sometimes. The human eye can't even distinguish between first place and fourth place a lot of times. We use electronics, but the prize is very different. Okay? And we can apply this to business. In fact, over half of all Fortune 500 companies use tournaments, mostly in terms of bonuses. And so who gets the bonus? The salesperson with the highest sales that month. And so tournaments involve winners and losers, but there might be behavioral costs associated with these tournaments. Basically what I'm saying is some people, not everyone, but some people might feel compassion or guilty when they win a bonus knowing that other people can't. All right, so think about it yourself. All right, so you're in an office and you're going up for a bonus and you've obviously got coworkers and colleagues that you care about. All right, and so if you get this bonus, I'm not going to try to tell you a sob story, all right, but you might feel a little bit bad that by you getting that bonus, other people can't, all right, just because you're human, all right? And so that's what I'm out here to look for, all right? I needed a task that replicated work, so I chose math questions, all right? And the reason for this is doing addition gets monotonous very quickly. Other researchers have used this and they find very little differences in the skill of men and women. Plus, because we learn to add at such a young age, there's very little learning. People don't magically get better at adding over the course of my experiment. All right, so this question says 10 plus 5 plus 1 plus 0. The correct answer is obviously 16. They can put in whatever they want. So they type it in, click OK, and then a new question immediately appears, along with this text box, which shows the previous question with the correct answer, the answer they submitted. If it matches up, then they got it right, they get a point. If it doesn't match, then they get it wrong and they lose a point. Right? On the left-hand side, it shows a counter, and each round is going to last for 6 minutes. So this is a picture of a lab that I have access to down in Atlanta, and it shows some computer terminals, and so the subjects would come in, we'd sign them in, and we'd assign them to a computer. And there's a projector and a whiteboard where I would go into the front and go over the instructions. And on the right-hand side, you can see the mailboxes, and we use what's called a double-blind protocol. And what we're trying to do here is ensure as much privacy as we can. And so the way we did this was I literally walked around with an envelope and subjects picked a mailbox key, and they're told not to share this number with anyone in the room, not even us. And that's what we're going to use to identify them with. All right? So everything is kept super secret. And then they do a practice round. So they just get some practice answering questions through the computer. I allow them to ask any questions. Typically, there were no questions. So then we go right into round one. All right? In round one, I tell them that they're going to be in groups of 2. So that's them and one other person. Right? They're never going to, remember, it's double blind, so they're never going to learn the identity of that other person. That other person's never going to learn their identity. I also tell them that they're not going to earn cash in this round. All right? But they have the opportunity to be able to earn a big advantage in this experiment. So, has anyone seen the show MasterChef? Right? It's all those competitive shows are sort of my guilty pleasure. All right, and so in MasterChef, there's the mystery box challenge. All right, and so all the home cooks, they're competing, and the judges select the home cook that has the best meal. And that chef earns a big advantage going into the next round, which is the elimination round. Well, it's the same thing here, all right? I tell them that you can't win money here, but if you score higher than your group member, then you're going to earn a big advantage. You're going to earn the title of decider, right? And the decider is going to earn the right to make a big decision that will have a major impact on your group's earnings. So, again, I allow for questions. If there's no questions and the screens, they pop up, turn on, all right? Then they do the task. Everyone's going to start answering these addition questions at the same time. 6 minutes goes by, and then the scores are revealed. And this is important because in round 2, they can get paid. They're told that they're going to be with the same group and doing the same task, and that they have to choose whether or not they want contract A, which pays them 80 cents per point if they score higher than their other person, but pays nothing if they score less. Or they can choose contract B that pays them 40 cents regardless of how well they do to the other person. So let's try to put ourselves in their shoes. All right, so when would you choose contract A? Well, let's say you've got 40 points and the other person's got 20 points. Well, you're probably feeling pretty confident, all right, because you've already done the practice round, you've already done round 1, you know that the scores don't change that much, so you're probably like, all right, I'm probably got a good chance of winning. If I go with contract A, I'm going to get $32. But if I go with contract B, then I'm only going to get $16. So when would you choose contract B? Well, the opposite, when the scores are really close probably, right? So if somebody's got 31 and the other person's got 30, all right, well now, geez, I might get some bad luck. I might get a string of some bad, hard questions, and I'm just going to play it safe because I want to make sure that I get some money. This round was called the I round, all right? They never see that term. That's the term that I use in the paper and in this presentation, but it stands for independent round, right? And what that means is we each get to choose our contracts independently of one another. You can choose contract A and I can choose contract B, and by doing that, I can reveal which contracts you prefer, which ones you like better. So this is an example of the decision screen, right? It shows we're going to be starting round 2. You're going to be grouped with the same person as round 1. It shows your score and their score, a summary of the contracts, and then they're asked to just choose between A and B. Sorry about that. So now we go into round 3. And what's different about round 3 is that the scores are never updated. They never learn the scores from round 2 because I want them to be using the same information from round 2 as in round 3. They're told that they're going to be doing the same task and that they're going to be in the same groups, Okay? And the other distinction is that only the decider is going to be choosing the contracts. And they have to choose the same contract for the group. And that has a major, major implication. All right? Because now, when I choose contract A, and presumably I would choose contract A because I think I'm going to win, okay? That means that I'm leaving you with nothing because I've got to choose the same contract for me as for you. Okay? So some people might feel guilty by doing this. Might feel a little compassion thinking that if I go and try to get lots of money, that's going to leave you with nothing. So some people might switch from A to B. So allow for questions, monitors come on, they do the task, 6 minutes goes by, all right, and basically the experiment is over at that point. All right, and so I go ahead and I pay them their earnings. I do some other little technical stuff which doesn't really matter for our purposes here. And now I'm sitting at my desk going over the results. There were 108 subjects, okay, and there are groups of 2, so that makes 54 groups, and each group has a decider, so there's 54 deciders. 47 of them chose contract A right off the back, right? So I'm going to call these people confident, right? They're confident because they think that they've got a good chance of winning, and so they're going for it. They're choosing contract A and going for that 80 cents, even though there's a chance that they're going to not get anything. Of those 47, 38 chose contract A again, and I categorize these people as self-regarding, which is just a polite word for selfish. All right? And the reason I'm calling them selfish is because they chose contract A again. Right? And really what this is probably like, you know, we're competing over this prize, and let the better man or better woman duke it out and win. Okay, but it's not really completely fair because they know that they have an advantage. 9 people chose contract A originally, so we showed which one they liked the better, but when they're going to affect the earnings of the other person, they switch to contract B. And so I categorize these people as altruistic. And altruistic means generous. And this is certainly generous behavior when you're sacrificing some of your own earnings to make sure that somebody else gets more money. 7 people chose contract B, the safe contract. And 6 of those went on again to choose contract B again. So we're going to call these people cautious because they're just trying to play it safe. They want to guarantee some money. And 1 person did something awfully strange. They went safe, all right, but then when they saw that they could leave somebody with nothing, they switched to contract A, all right? We would usually call that person a jerk, all right? But I went with malevolent. Right? And luckily, at the end, I had a survey, which I paid them to fill out. Right? And so they wrote very, very complete answers. And this person fessed up and said, oops, I clicked the wrong button. Right? So I don't know how you would do that. This radio button seems pretty clear to me. But I think, if I remember correctly, they said that they actually meant to go cautious. Okay, but I just throw that person out. It's just easier to do it that way. And talking about the survey, all right, I've included 2 comments. There's a whole bunch of comments in the paper, but here's 2. And it says, subject 44 says, I decided to be fair for round 3 and give each me and my partner the chance to earn 40 cents per question instead of me winning all the money. Subject 15 says, I was expecting the other group member to get a lower score, so I chose contract B to avoid forcing them to get nothing in the event that this happened. I think it's very clear from these 2 comments that they understood the experiment and that they understood the dilemma, that if they go with A, okay, they're probably going to win, and that means that the other person is going to get nothing. And we finish it, it says, I did not want my decision to prevent them from earning money. To me, that sounds like compassion. To me, that sounds like, I don't want my choices to be the reason that you don't make anything today. Okay? And by the way, we had 9 people switch from A to B. Right? That's no small number. 9 out of 47 is about 20%. Right? And the cost to giving, the cost to being generous was very expensive in my experiment. I had to give up half of my earnings in order for you to get something. Think about it. So if I scored 40 and you scored 20, right, and I could go with contract A and get 80 cents, I would get $32. But I'm going to feel bad. So I might go with contract B, go from $32 to $16. So I've got to give up $16 so that you get something. And if you have 20 points, all you're going to get, 20 times 4, help me, 12? No. 8. All right, so it cost me $16, all right, to make sure that you only get $8. Okay, so it's very, very expensive. I could have propped up the numbers by making it less expensive, all right, but I wanted to create a scenario where it was obvious that people have, they're having a huge moral cost to feeling this compassion, that there's this huge behavioral cost associated with tournaments. And so I wanted to make it as difficult for people as possible. So this is my last slide. Okay, it's also my most important slide. This is where I wrap everything together. All right, and so if you believe that my experiment has internal validity, and so that people were feeling things like compassion and guilt, and that people understood the experiment, then maybe you're willing to make this next leap with me and say that this data has importance outside of the lab. Right? I believe it does, and I hope that you do as well. Right? And so I used what's called a multinomial Logit regression. And I memorized that just to make myself sound smart in front of all of you. All right? And there's a whole bunch of variables that I have, but I'm only going to focus on one, which is females, because that's what our topic is on. And women were 55 times more likely to act cautious, and they were 9.5 times more likely to go altruistic. And that little star means that it's statistically significant, right? And those numbers are huge, right? The magnitudes of those numbers are huge. And so if we want to take this outside, so if we want to see what this means like in the real world, right? Maybe it goes something like this. So to be considered cautious, you had to choose contract B twice. So you're basically, to be cautious, you choose contract B, the safe option, 2 times. And so maybe women are choosing jobs that are less risky, not in terms of physical safety, but of course it could mean that, but probably more in terms of job security or wage security. So women prefer more steady sources of income. They want to know how much they're earning every 2 weeks so that they can budget and plan. Right? Any women feel like that? Okay, a couple. Not a lot, but a couple. All right, it's okay. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that. But everybody wants those things. Okay, but because that's a benefit. Everyone wants to have a steady source of income, but companies that offer those tend to be, everything else will be lower paying. And women were 9.5 times more likely to be altruistic. Well, how did we get to altruistic? Well, they chose contract A, all right, which meant that they like bonuses, but when their bonus meant that somebody else couldn't get a bonus, then they were willing to sacrifice some of their own earnings to make sure that the pay was more equal. All right? And so if you're in a job that pays people more based on equality, then the wages are also going to be lower. Here's one very, very important thing. I don't want you to miss it. To be altruistic, for a person to give up, like for a woman to switch, they did so even when they were the most deserving. Even when they were the high performer, they were willing to give up some of their own earnings to make sure that the pay was more spread across the board. That's really nice. That's something to be celebrated and kudos, okay? But it's also going to mean that they're going to be making less money. So I'm offering up 3 reasons why women make less money than men. The first reason was Carnevale's reason, that women choose different majors. And I've offered up 2 of our own. One, that women prefer more stable sources of income, so they're more cautious. And the third one, that women prefer more equitable sources of income. Okay? All of these will depress wages, but all of it is based on women's preferences. All of this has to do with women's preferences and their choices that they make in life, and none of it has to do with outright discrimination. Of course, that could exist, right? But maybe the fact that men and women make different amounts of money isn't such a problem because just men and women have different preferences. And I finish with 4 minutes.
One of the things I learned from that is, one of the things you learn from that study is that to find people who are motivated by 40 and 80 cent rewards, this was clearly done with King faculty as the test group. So next time I want in on that. That was a great job. Thank you so much, Alexander. You get this handsome plaque, which you will see in his office at some point. Please join me again in thanking Alexander Brumlik.